I'm Marty Schenker. I'm Chief Content Officer of Bloomberg News, and I'm delighted to be here in one of my favorite cities to kick off a day of discussions around the most important trends and challenges facing Japan and the world going into next year. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Audi, Audemars Piguet, and Barclays, for helping making this event possible. And at the conclusion of this event, Audi will be providing an exclusive shuttle service featuring its new A7, A8, and Q7 models to the destination of your choice. So space is limited, so please see the folks in the booth in the next room if you would like this exclusive shuttle service. And now I am also a salesman, apparently. Japan has a long heritage of innovation, from robots to bullet trains to digital farming to deep learning. And some of us are old enough to remember the Walkman, even. So Tokyo is in many ways the perfect place to stage an event that looks at what's next. We are honored to have Japan Economy Minister Motegi as our keynote speaker. As you know, Minister Motegi is leading Japan's economic revitalization, and I look forward to his comments and my brief conversation with him afterwards. Throughout the day, we'll be hosting some of Japan's and the world's most influential business leaders who will share their views with all of us. But we want you in the audience to be part of the conversation as well. So we are going to poll you. Our moderators will ask you questions that will appear on the screen behind me, and you can reply using your mobile phones. In fact, why don't we try that right now? Go to the browser on your phone and enter www.pigeonhole.at. There's nothing to download. The passcode is TYA 2018, the year ahead 2018. I'll give you a minute to do that. Okay, so my first question is of world importance. Who will win the 2019 World Rugby Cup? Your choices, and I did not pick these, South Africa, A, Japan, B, and New Zealand, C. And once you enter your prediction, the answer should be on the screen. Well, it looks like New Zealand has it. Now that you're all warmed up, we can get started. Please do participate, and I hope the day provides you with new and insightful ideas on how to make 2019 a success. So to begin today's proceedings, I'd like to invite Minister Motegi to the stage to begin our session. Thank you.
Mr. Schenker, thank you very much for your kind introduction. I'll take the answer C. I'm honored to be invited to the Year Ahead Summit held by Bloomberg. I'd like to express my gratitude to Mr. Schenker, Chief Comment Officer of Bloomberg, and all the audience.
Last year in August, I assumed the post of the Minister of State for Economic and Fiscal Policy, and I was reappointed to the post at the Cabinet reshuffle in October. I will continue to be in charge of economic and fiscal policy and Japan-U.S. trade negotiation. And this year in Japan, TPP was held in Chile, and it was decided that it is going to be entering force on December 30th of this year. The signing ceremony was held in Chile, and at the end of September, well, today we have the Ambassador Haggerty, but Japan and U.S. decided that it is going to start the U.S.-Japan trade agreement on goods. And the TPP11 is going to come into force within this year, and the new members are coming into scope, and Japan-U.S. trade negotiation is going to be in a new stage to discuss the concrete measures. So I would like to speak about the trade policy area and also the outlook for the next year. As for the TPP11, last year in January, U.S. expressed its intention to exit. And then Japan became the leader of the discussion. And on March 8th, there was a signing ceremony in Chile. And when I went to Chile, well, the Diet was in session, and I was not able to get permission from the Diet very easily. So to Chile, Santiago, I went without staying overnight, 0, and then 4 days. But then I was able to sign this agreement. So it's going to be 500 million people and GDP $10 trillion. It is going to be an enormously large economic sphere. And it's 1.5% push for the Japanese GDP. And that is the economic effect proceeded from this TPP11. And TPP11 had finished the domestic procedure for the domestic procedure for 6 countries, and then after that, within 60 days, it's going to come into force, starting from Japan, Mexico, and the 6th country on October 31st, Australia finished the domestic procedure, and it is going to come into force on December 30th. It was determined that it would come into force. And on November 15th, the 7th country, Vietnam, finished the domestic procedures. So all the other countries are accelerating their domestic procedures. And after this TPP coming into force, there are the new entrants coming into our scope, such as Thailand, Indonesia, and UK, so that we can enlarge the new rule of TPP globally. So as the coordinator, Japan, various areas and regions are expressing their interest to join TPP, and Japan welcomes this great deal. The TPP participants are going to be the part of the new rules suitable for 21st century. We are not going to be monopolizing this, but this is going to be shared all around the world. We are committed to that. And in January of next year, we are going to have the first ministerial level conference in Japan. And on that occasion, we want to like to see the concrete progress about the new members. And then next year, Japan, EU, and EPA agreement would come into effect. Now, the protectionist movements are around the globe, but the 21st new rules suitable for the 21st century is going to be spread, and Japan would like to continue to be the leader for this movement. Next, I'd like to touch upon the U.S. trade policy and Japan-U.S. trade negotiations. President Trump this year says that we need to correct the huge deficit in trade with the other countries, so that he had put into effect the Article 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. Especially with China, there has been the escalation of the punitive duties and retaliatory duties. So this is not just affecting Chinese economy and the U.S. economy, but is concern that this is going to impact the world economy. Another point of concern is that the Trump administration is preparing to invoke Article 232 on automotive imports. Japan to U.S., we export over 7 trillion yen automotive exports, and this is 1/3 all the exports to the United States. And my role, my responsibility is very great in this trade area between U.S.-Japan. And U.S.-Japan trade negotiation, the great interest of the U.S. is on the trade deficit. However, if we look at the U.S.-Japan economic relations, it is different from the trade friction of the 1980s and 1990s. For example, from Japan to the United States, we export 1.7 million cars annually, and the local production in the United States by the Japanese automotive makers is very much progressing and with active investment. So it is much larger than 1.7 million, and this is 3.8 million cars. Including the automotive parts makers and dealers, we are contributing to producing 1.5 million jobs in the United States. Needless to say, since we have Ambassador Haggerty, I'd like to say this, the U.S.-Japan, especially in the security issue, since we have the North Korean issue that is rapidly changing, the importance of U.S.-Japan alliance is ever more important, especially in the economic area, not confrontation, but we are expected to pursue the win-win relationship for both U.S. and Japan.
Based on this idea, twice in early August and late September, I had 2 ministerial meetings with Mr. Lighthizer, the U.S. Trade Representative. During these 2 meetings, we spent a large amount of time alone without the presence of any of our aides or staff members, talking about differences in the positions of the U.S. and Japan and where we might be able to meet in the middle point. And as a result, for the U.S.-Japan summit on September 26th, we were able to formulate a joint statement and agreed to initiate trade negotiations for the TAG, Trade Agreement on Goods. In the joint statement for the trade negotiations, of course, we have clarified the U.S. position, but we also clarified the Japan's position regarding the agriculture and fishery products, that Japan would not concede, and the commitment level that was made by Japan in the past EPAs would be the maximum limit. That was something that we have clarified. And also we confirmed that the negotiations will be held in the mutual trust, and neither party will behave in the way that goes against the spirit of agreement. For the automotive, it means that the Section 232 additional tariffs would not be imposed during the negotiation. I was present at the summit meeting, and this is the point that Mr. Abe confirmed personally with Mr. Trump. For both Japan and the U.S., the agreement became a very good starting point in my mind. However, this agreement constitutes only a start of the process. The concrete negotiations are yet to be held, probably at the beginning of the year. The negotiation will not be easy. However, we will make sure that we will generate an outcome that is beneficial for both countries. Last but not least, protectionism is spreading all around the world, and Japan is a country which benefited greatly from free trade. Therefore, Japan must play a leading role in supporting the free trade system. In the Japan-US summit in September, both countries confirmed that we will expand our cooperation against unfair trade practices of third countries, such as forced technological transfer and other actions that goes against and distorts the market mechanism. Japan will continue to cooperate with the US and Europe and play a leading role in Asia so that we can establish a free and fair, brand new set of rules suitable for the 21st century. Japan would like to play a leading role in the world, and the TPP is a driving force for that purpose.
In concluding, let me tell you one thing. TPP11, the brand new rules suitable for the 21st century, is the result of every single effort by negotiators of participating countries to solve problems one by one. For each negotiator, it has been small steps after small steps, However, it is a quantum leap in the history of trade, starting from barter exchange to Mediterranean trade to Silk Road, to the age of exploration, and to the present. Thank you very much.
Minister, have a seat.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a seat.
Mm-hmm. Too wide. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So I'm going to ask you a few questions following up on your remarks. Between Donald Trump and China, there's no shortage of threats to the international trading system these days. But Japan has produced, as you noted, a notable success with the CPTPP deal. What role does Japan play going forward from here in the world stage on trade?
Right. 国際的な貿易体制
In the international trade system, the role of Japan, as you had alluded to, in one word, until now, we had been one of the major players. That was our role, but we are going to have the new rule formation. We are going to be the leader in formation of the new rules. And as you had said, TPP11, last year in January, U.S. decided to exit TPP, so that the TPP was kind of in a drift. There was a concern that TPP is going to be drifting, but Japan had been the leader of the negotiation all the way through. And in November, we went to Da Nang of Vietnam, although there was the issue of Canada, but we had agreed to the principle. And on March 8th, we were able to have the signing ceremony in Chile. We were able to travel this route because in Santiago, we had a ministerial meeting in Santiago of Chile, and the ministers of the other countries said that Japan had assumed the role of the leadership. That's because we were able to come this far. So the leadership of Japan and coordination ability of Japan had played a big role and was acknowledged as such by the other members. So TPP coming into force would mean that free and fair 21st century suited principles would come into effect, and then it is going to expand in the world. So this is a strong message that Japan is going to send. And by this TPP11 and Japan in the negotiation of TPP11, the free trade system, Japan was a major player, but it is going to be the suitable for the 21st century, the new rules establishment leader and the overall coordinator. That is the role that Japan is going to assume. And this is what Japan strongly wishes to do. And Japan is the leader of the free trade and the free and fair rules trade and the economic order is what Japan would like to assume.
As leader, what other countries are you seeking to lure into the new trade arrangement?
先ほど申し上げましたが
As I had said, in TPP, the new values and the new merits sought in this TPP. So the participants in TPP, not just the 11 countries that are now participants, but for the entire world, this should be shared. That is my opinion. And the new entrants, as candidates, we have Thailand. And I myself went to Bangkok this May, and in Thailand, I had Somkit, Deputy Minister. We had a direct exchange of opinions. And Deputy Minister, Prime Minister Somkit said that it is going to have the revolutionary efforts for the Thai structure of the industry, and Thai would like to join this TPP. And Indonesia, and then Colombia of the South America. And so various participants, entrants are possible. And moreover, UK that is going to exit EU has much interest to join TPP, and I like to welcome that. So Brexit, as a result of Brexit, so it depends on what kind of a relationship that UK is going to have with EU, but we like to give necessary information to UK. And next year, January, we are going to have the TPP committee in Japan, and then Japan as a chairman, and we hold that meeting in Japan so that as for the administration of the TPP or the new members and new directions, we are going to decide in that meeting. And when that happens, as for the new entrants, we want to have a concrete progress in that meeting next January.
A different set of issues, and that is what has become very prominent in the last week, and that is the relationship between China and the United States. Are you very concerned about those discussions? Are you optimistic that they will reach a fruitful conclusion, or are your own bilateral negotiations with the U.S. more of a concern for you?
Well, in concept, I have to say I'm cautiously optimistic.
But in any case, as I have been saying, the other countries are having the escalating war of the punitive duties, but this is not going to be an desirable outcome for any country, and this kind of situation we should need to resolve as soon as possible. So all the countries in the world should never have a detrimental effect on the world economy. I think that is the most important issue. And in the United States, in China, the GDP is the first and the second in the world. And what is happening here would mean that it has much effect to the other nations. For example, the industrial products exports to U.S. from China, that is that all produced domestically in China? But the parts, the 40% are coming from areas outside China. And the Chinese economy, if that is to decrease in growth, then the other countries, the Southeast Asia nations that were dependent on the Chinese high growth, would be negatively affected. But on the other hand, the unfair trade rules should be changed, and so that for the international society as a whole, we should call to rectify the unfair trade practices. So between U.S. and Japan, we have the framework of the free and fair trade framework, and I would like to say that to the United States as well.
Discussions with the United States on reducing this deficit that seems to be the fixation of the trade negotiators in the U.S. How far is Japan willing to go to help reduce that deficit or allow access for U.S. companies into sensitive areas in Japan?
私はですね、国会議員になって25年になります。
So I am for the 25 years been a Diet member, but then we had the consulting of McKinsey, and the Haggerty, Ambassador Haggerty was in Boston Consulting. So when I was in McKinsey, we tried to reduce the trade deficit. As a consultant of this business consulting company, well, the trade balance, it is for the trade, export and import, and the economic activities result of the private sector. And the role of the government, what is now I am a part of, is that to promote the free and fair rules for the trade so that we can have more active economic activities. I think that is the role of the government. And as I said in my opening speech, for both the United States and Japan, we should have a win-win relationship for the merits of both the countries' interests. That is my belief. But Japan has its own strengths, and in the United States has its own strengths. And Japanese companies, the very dynamic investments to the United States is going to contribute to the production and also the employment of the United States. But on the other side, the natural resources that Japan is lacking, the LNG imports from the United States, we are going to have substantial amount of LNG imports from the United States, and it is going to effectively contribute to decreasing the trade deficit for the United States. And also, we are going to diversify the sources of energy. So this is actually a win-win relationship.
I think that's a very laudable goal, and I wish you a lot of success in those discussions with Mr. Lighthizer, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you very much.
Okay.